So this is the start of Module 4, Topic 1. And in this unit, we're going to be looking at periodic functions, okay? And what periodic functions are functions where the values that just repeat themselves over and over and over, okay? All right, we can see that in all these three graphs on the bottom here, 1 through 3. Okay, so we have a graph here that goes down, then up, then down. And it's going to keep going down and up and down. Same thing with number 2. It goes up, and then it goes down, and it goes up and down and up and down. All right, because it keeps repeating itself doing the same motion each time, it's called a periodic function. All right, something that periodic functions have, and the reason they're called periodic functions is because they have what's called a period. All right, the period of our graph is the one cycle of the graph before it starts to repeat itself again. Okay, so if we look at number 1, it goes down, and it goes up, across the x-axis, it goes down. When it hits here, it's about to start repeating the same motion it started with. So this is its period, okay? It's 4 pi. Okay, now a lot of times periodic functions are their x terms, their x-axis is measured in what's called a radian, and a radian is a good example. A radian is 4 pi. All right, I'm not going to get too deep into what radians are right now. That's going to be a topic for later. We're just going to introduce you to the types of graphs you're going to see with periodic functions. Okay, and number 2, we start going up. We go down past the x-axis. We go up again, and when we're about to start repeating the graph, this is our period. It's pi long on the x-axis. All right, they don't always have to be in radians, but most of the time they are. In this case, in number 3, it is not in radians. Okay, so we start at 0, right? And then we're going to go up, down past the x-axis, then back up again, and right here is where it's going to start to repeat, and that would be 8. Okay, so the period of number 3 is 8. Okay, some other things about these graphs. They have minimums and maximum values. All right. I like to say the minimums and the maximums. The maximums are the peaks of the graph, where the minimums are the valleys. Okay, so here you can have multiple maxes of the same number. So these are all maxes. Well, these are all the mins, the minimums. All right, you can see that for all the different graphs that you do for these periodic functions. Okay. There's another thing called what's called the midline. The midline is directly between the max and the min. It's cutting the graph into half on a horizontal plane. Okay. So you can see that between the max and that green line is 2. Between the minimum and the green line is also 2. All right. For a base function, the midline is going to be on the x-axis. Okay, if you have a vertical shift on your graph, that midline can change. Okay. All right. What else? Amplitude. Amplitude is the distance between the midline and the max, or the midline and the minimum. Okay, so if we look at the graph in the middle here at number 2, change colors again. We'll go to blue. All right, this distance, oh, that was ugly. This distance is your amplitude. Okay, it's the same whether it's on the top or the bottom. Okay, so that's your amplitude, that distance between the midline and the max, or the midline and the minimum. Okay. Now, if you want to find the amplitude, you can take the total height of the graph from the minimum to the maximum and divide it by 2. All right, that will tell you what the minimum is. Oh, sorry, the amplitude is. Okay, so let's look at some of these examples down here and to talk about some of the things that happen in the graph. Okay, we're just looking at characteristics. Okay, so we have here the graph. All right, so the graph's going to start on the y-axis. So we're going to start it right here. Oh, let's change colors. Red. Okay, now this graph has a vertical shift in it. You can't see it because you don't have the equation. Okay, but if we go down, up, and then back down, right here is where the graph's going to start to repeat itself. And that period is going to be 2 pi. Okay, your maximum is the highest point of the graph, which is going to be 4. Okay, let's go to the minimum. The minimum is the lowest point of the graph, the valley. That's going to be -2. Okay, the amplitude, if we cut the graph in half horizontally, here is your midline equation, or midline, just your midline. So that equation would be y equals 1. Okay, and your amplitude is going to be the distance between the midline and the max, or the midline and the minimum. And that is 1, 2, and 3. So the amplitude is 3. Okay, and there's all the different parts of the graph you need to know. Okay, another way you can find the amplitude if you want to is to take the total height of the graph. So from -2 to +4 is 6, all right, a total distance, and then divide that by 2 and you get the amplitude of 3. Okay, let's look at another example. All right, again, we're going to start here on the x-axis, on the y-axis. So right here, this is a weird looking graph. Okay, so it's going to go up, down, and then up right here, and it's going to stop, all right, before it starts to repeat. So that means your period is going to be 8. All right, your maximum is the peak, which in this case is 5. The minimum is the valley, which is -2. All right, your amplitude. So you can take your to find the amplitude, and take the total distance. So -2 to 5 is going to be 7 total. And then divide that by 2. Your amplitude is going to be 3.5. All right, and your midline is going to be on that point. So if it's 3.5, there was a formula up here to do the midline. You're going to take the max plus the minimum, divide it by 2. So if we take 5 plus -2, we get 3, and divide it by 2. So the equation would be y equals 3 over 2, or 1.5. Either way. Okay. All right. So what I'd like you to do is we got one more to do. Pause this video. Try doing the 5 different things on the graph, or 5 different pieces of information from the graph. All right. And then once you're done, start the video back up, and then we'll go over the answer. Okay. So please pause the graph, try the problem, and then come back to it. So if you tried the graph, or the characteristics of the graph, so let's look and see what they are. So here we started the y-axis. We're going to go down all the way. We're going to go up, and right here, right when we're about to start the graph again, all right, that's going to be our period. So you're going to see this is going to be 0.5. All right, your maximum is the highest point on the graph, which is going to be -1. The minimum is the lowest point on the graph, in this case is -5. Your amplitude, we take from -5 to -1, that is going to be the height of 4. Okay, so 4 divided by 2 is 2. The amplitude is 2. Okay, and then if we take the midline, -1 plus -5 is -6. -6 divided by 2 is y is equal to -3. And you can see that here. I'm going to change the color. The midline is going to be at -3, and that cuts the graph along that horizontal line right in half. Okay, so the top half is the same distance as the bottom half. And you can see here, when you look at the amplitude, you go from -3 to -2, and -2 to -1, and that is 2 for the amplitude, which checks out with our number there. Okay, and that is the end. So what I'd like you to do, please open up the practice sheet, try the practice, and then see how you do. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.